I am so excited because I have Lisa Salisbury here. She is a life coach and weight coach, and the first coach that I've interviewed on my YouTube channel. So I'm so excited to dive into what coaching is and how we can use it in our weight and health journey, whether we are utilizing a GLP-1 or another medication, or if we're focusing just on diet and nutrition. So I would love to welcome Lisa and go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thanks so much for having me, Dr. Ogle. I'm excited to share what I do with your viewers and listeners. So, yeah, I am a life coach. My background, I do also have a bachelor's in health and human performance. So, I kind of came to this work due to just kind of my lifelong interest in health and the human body. And I'm also a certified health coach. And so, what we do is there's some amount of accountability that a coach will give you, but I think the main thing that I do is to help my clients see their blind spots. Because a lot of times, whether it's weight related or relationships or any of the other things we might be trying to improve in our life, you're pretty sure you're doing everything you can. When you finally resort to a coach, you're like, I don't know why this isn't working. And that's what we're really good at, is seeing some of your blind spots. And with weight loss and health, a lot of times your thoughts do really get in the way of the healthy habits that you're trying to encourage in your life. And so just looking at it from an outside perspective, helping you get your brain just kind of downloaded. Let's see what's really causing this. And I do use a model that was developed by Brooke Castillo of the Life Coach School, and it's based on cognitive behavioral theory. So we're looking at, rather than our circumstances, the facts in our life, we're looking at the thoughts that are creating our results. So it's pretty much never the circumstance. And it's always what we are making that circumstance or those facts mean. And the very simplest way that I can describe this to someone is by thinking about your scale weight. It is very, very factual because it's data, it's math, it's the gravitational pull on your body at that moment in time. And your current weight, whatever it is, like literally whatever it is somebody's goal weight. And even if you're like, no way, that couldn't be true because I weigh this much, so much, whatever, it's somebody's goal weight for the week. Somebody is happy to see that number, even if you're sad to see that number or frustrated to see that number, or whatever your reaction is, there's someone else that's having a different thought looking at that same exact circumstance of that number. And so that's kind of the first way I can help people differentiate between what's really the fact and what is the thought about it. And of course, that drives your results for the day.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for going through that explanation. And that's how Lisa and I met each other, really was through the life coach school. I found out about coaching when I was in residency training and I was
Mm.
listening to podcasts, and it was actually a medicine-based podcast, but one of the physicians was talking about how she went through the life coach school and was introduced to coaching and then became a coach herself. And it's like, what is this coaching, I guess, path? And so I listened to all of those podcasts and then, got coaching myself through the life coach school. And I just love this approach because until you, it can sound obvious, but we don't naturally think like that. Our brain doesn't think
Hmm.
that the circumstances are neutral. We really automatically place like a positive or a negative association with it. And when we can work with a coach, they can help to tease that out and to really see where our thoughts, the sentences in our brain, are creating how we feel about that neutral circumstance. And it is so helpful when you have somebody walking you through that to apply it to your own life.
Yeah, for sure. And there's just so many thoughts that are happening when it comes to weight loss and body changes up or down. there's just a lot in the brain about it.
Yeah, yeah. And one of the more common ones I think that women or anybody on a weight loss journey has is that they're going to feel so much better when they hit their goal weight or, a
Mhm.
future number on the scale. They think that that number is going to bring them happiness. I'd love to
Mhm.
hear your thoughts about that and how you help with mindset along that journey. And I guess with your experience with your clients, do you see that people really are happier when they reach that goal weight, or what do you see with your clients?
So that's kind of that's kind of a little bit of a cheater question because my clients actually are, but only because we've worked on it all the way down.
Mhm.
If you're not working on it, if all you're doing is saying, when I lose the weight, then I'll be happy, that actually doesn't work because your brain comes along with you. Whatever your brain is doing at your high weight is the same thing your brain is going to do at your low weight, which is nitpick and find problems and, try to place blame. So when you are working on your mindset along the way of the weight loss, first of all, I find my clients tend to kind of quote unquote need to lose less weight.
Mm.
So they have this number in mind, and then they're like, actually, I'm like, I'm good. Like they feel so much better in their brain. They're not like nitpicking, which just gives you what I call a little bit of like walking around weight, right? We're not trying to get down to, none of my clients are trying to get down to like what I call stage weight, right? I don't train bikini models. Right? But that's not their, even for those women, those competitors, that's not their walking around weight. They don't walk around day to day like that. And so a lot of times you think like, I'm going to be happy at this like extremely low weight, but really it's probably 5 or 10 pounds above that where you're going to find like some freedom. You're going to have a little bit of flexibility, but you also have treated your body so nicely all the way down the scale when you're working with someone like me that it is it is good. You are happy at that point. And so, yes, like you can find happiness when you get there, but the caveat is if you're doing the work. And I love to tell people like you can't hate yourself thin. And I think that when we're thinking I'll be happy when is a form of hating ourselves thin because you're telling yourself happiness isn't available to you right now because your body is incorrect, right? In some way your body is wrong. And so you aren't allowed to be happy. And that sounds extreme. You're like, I don't actually say those words. That's the underlying message. That's the like the parenthetical thought, like the thought in parentheses under the one that you're thinking out loud, right? It's the kind of the subtext. It's like what it means. And this is what we do as coaches is to bring out that meaning. And so once we get used to treating our bodies with kindness and respect as they are doing their thing that bodies do, which is hopefully a downward trajectory as it's all over the board, right? It's up, it's down, it's up, it's down, and we're hoping for an overall downward trajectory. But those are the times where it's harder to treat your body kindly. And when you have, then or excuse me, when you're not doing those things, sorry, I was kind of on the trying to hate ourselves then, right? When you're not doing those things, you're not going to end up in a happier space.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm curious also with your client's experience, because it sounds like it's up and down with kind of the weight, and that's what I see with my
Sure.
patients, is it's not a consistent weight loss over time, and that's okay, and that's expected, in the path of weight management and health. Do you see the same thing in, I guess, their thoughts about themselves and their bodies during this journey?
Yeah, for sure. And I know I've followed other coaches and where you're just like some days you just like wake up and you're like it's a bad body image day. Like these things happen. Some days you're like, look at me. I'm gonna wear, this dress that I love. And other days you wake up and you're like, wow, I feel like a busted can of biscuits. And like, yeah, your mindset can go up and down. And I find that has less to do with my clients, with the coaching that I do, because we get like very disconnected from the scale right away. Like we take that meaning out right from the beginning. So I feel like those kind of mindset days have more to do with our 20, not our 28-day cycle rather than our 24-hour cycle, right? So there is a 24-hour circadian rhythm, but I find that those mindset things tend to be more on our monthly cycle. And it's not to blame your hormones, it's just that you're not the same every single day of the month, right?
Not at
You
all.
just aren't.
Yeah.
And it's okay. And you don't, it's not that you need to make these drastic changes or, I don't subscribe to like doing specific workouts at specific times of the month, like just do your workouts, but know that I'm not going to think the same every day. And we are looking for progress. So I will say one of the things that we do, I have my clients set goals at the beginning, and usually there's a weight loss goal, but I always have them set a mindset goal as well. And then we give it a rating. So I see things like I want to eat better. Like, how do you define that? I don't think I eat very well, or I want to have a better relationship with food. These are difficult goals to measure and to decide if you've achieved because you have these up and down days. So a lot of times, like on that one specifically, like better relationship with food, I have them give me some examples, like what's a good relationship, what's a quote unquote bad relationship, and where are you on a scale of 1 to 10? If one is the worst and it's all of those things that you described as a bad relationship, and 10 is some ideal, where are you? And so they say, like, I'm a 4. And then I don't revisit that like every week. I wait. And then at the end of the working together, I'm like, so this is kind of how you described, blah, blah, blah. Where would you say you're on that scale? And I don't tell them because they almost never write it down. I do.
Yeah.
And they'll be like, I think I'm like a 7 or 8, which is not perfect because we're human.
Mhm.
But when they see that much progress in what they rate themselves, that's where you know you've really made progress on your mindset.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you define those goals with your clients because I think we have a tendency, or our minds have a tendency to be really vague, and especially when we're putting ourselves down,
Mhm.
and just say, yeah, we're not, we don't have a good relationship with food, or we're not exercising correctly. But yeah, what does that mean? Because I'm sure there are things that you are doing correctly. And when we can specifically identify that, name it, either we write it down or the person we're working with writes it down so we can remember and watch it over time, we will be amazed at what we're doing. And I think that's so important, that to tease that out and pull out and highlight over time. So I'm glad that you do that.
Yeah, I find a scale of 1 to 10 works really well. Like it's basic, but it's just something we're used to with a pain scale, and so people kind of respond to that and they're able to give themselves those kinds of ratings. So yeah.
Well, I'm curious, your experience with clients who are using medications, we'll say a GLP-1, and the
Mhm.
medications are helping to suppress their hunger and increase fullness. And maybe somebody's thinking, oh, well, if I'm taking the medication, I don't need to work on my mindset because I'm on the medication and that's, helping
Mhm.
me. What do you see with your clients, as far as how their, I guess, brains are working while on the medication? And if somebody, like most of us, use food to help comfort us, either with negative emotions or celebrating positive emotions, when we don't have that option, how do you help your clients address that?
Yeah. Yeah, it is super important still to be actively working on your brain, even though it's not like a hunger challenge anymore. Because that, with my clients that aren't on medication, that's where we start, is on their hunger fullness cues and kind of getting back in touch with that. But when we don't have that feedback with the medication, yeah, a lot of times they're just like, oh, I'll worry about it later, and they kind of push it off. Or like, I'll learn how to maintain once I lose. But we want to maintain in the same way that we are losing. Otherwise, it is just a quote unquote diet.
Mhm.
And then we think we're going to like go back to normal. Like there's just a lot of issues with that. So I know, so the first thing you asked me was like, do people push off working on their mindset? And I would say yes. But then you also asked something else, which now I was kind of thinking about my answer to the first part. What was the second part?
It's okay. When we don't, so many of us use food to cope with negative or
Oh,
positive emotions. So when we don't
right.
have that option, how do you
Yes.
approach that with clients?
Okay. So sorry. Yes. So yes, it's confusing because your body will still possibly have some of those same habits. So if like you're a person who's like habitually goes to the kitchen the immediate moment that you get home from work, like that's just your habit, that's just your path. You're going to still do that. And then you're like, "Oh, like nothing really sounds good." And so you're in that transition, which that's just one example of like an emotional time transitions when you're coming like from work to home. So if you are, say, a mom and you're like, okay, I'm going from work to now mom, you change roles. There that transition time can be very uncomfortable. And so we often use food. If you notice you are a person that like grabs a snack every time you get in the car, it's a transition. You're moving into a different activity. And so these transitions can be very uncomfortable. And then you're left with nothing to soothe that because the truth is, medications or not, food works.
Mhm.
Food does work to soothe our emotions because it gives us that little dopamine hit and we feel a little bit better. Shonda Rhimes, in her book Year of Yes, she's like, I would come home from a long day of work and I just wanted to spackle some chocolate cake on top of that. And here's the rub, food works. Like I always remember that line because it does. And so what we have to do, especially on medications, but even for my clients that aren't, because they are eating less and because they're wanting to stop that emotional eating, we have to sort of look at our lives and how do we make our lives amazing so food does not have the job of constantly being the entertainer, the supporter, the comforter, and all of the things that we use food to do. So we want to take a look at what are the feelings that we're having, what are the emotions that are coming up when we want to eat. And then that's going to give us the information about how else to solve for that. Some of this is going to sound very coachy, like self-care. Yes, I know. But at the same time, like, actually, yes. Are you actually doing that? Do you actually like do the things that your body and your life require to reduce stress, care for yourself, give yourself a little celebration? Like, when's the last time you were like, yay, me. I like got dinner on time for all of these kids or for myself before I had to head off to a meeting and it actually had a good amount of protein. Like, hooray, pat myself on the back. Like, even just acknowledging your accomplishments without eating over it is self-care. Like, being honest about what you accomplished is great and being forgiving when you don't, right? And so it's just getting really, really honest with your feelings and then looking at what else can solve for those feelings. So, yeah, sometimes you're going to distract, sometimes you're going to go on a walk, sometimes you're going to have, a big glass of water, and other times you're going to sit with the feeling and be like, "Oh, here's here's what I'm feeling right now. It's called frustration. It feels terrible."
Yeah.
So there is a lot of like emotion processing and then just looking at some of your well-being activities. What are you doing to create dopamine that isn't eating? So we do a lot of work around that as well.
That's awesome. I had so many thoughts after that. It just makes me think, again, thinking back to my experience with coaching, especially during training when I was so busy and probably didn't give myself enough time to process my emotions or even acknowledge them or to acknowledge, all the work that I was doing. And I think it is so powerful when you're working with somebody else who, I know you're trained in this and everyone from the life coach school to hold space for your
Mm.
client where they can bring to you, how they're feeling. And as if I was your client, may not even know what I'm experiencing right now, but you know how to give us space and ask the right questions to kind of bring it out and allow, the client to process that with you. And I think sometimes doing it with somebody who has that training, um, it's so powerful to do it with somebody else, and then you have the tool to do it with yourself later on, so you can then start to apply that in those situations.
Hmm.
So I love that because so many of us are so busy and we're just not even taking a pause to check in with ourselves. Um,
Hmm.
and that is a skill. That is a skill to learn, and working with somebody can be so helpful with that. I also would love to hear your thoughts about, the self-care aspect, right? Because we
Hmm.
do hear that a lot, like we need to practice self-care. I think people immediately think to like bubble baths or, manicures or whatever, and that can be great, but for everyone it's different. And I'm just curious, like if you can think of specific clients that obviously no names or anything, but like examples of what people have implemented and how that has improved their relationship with themselves or with food or, coping with their emotions.
Yeah. Some of the well-being activities that we identify, kind of when I do that activity with them, are things that you're already doing, but you're rushing or just not paying attention, not acknowledging that these are self-care. So, like, an easy one for me, especially in the winter, is like a really hot shower.
Mm.
Don't tell me, like, dermatologists, how bad that is for my skin. Like, I want it to be fiery, right? I want it to burn off my skin, but I just love a hot shower. And so when I get in, like, I purposely like take a deep breath, feel my shoulders relax, and be like, this feels good. Like, acknowledge the things you're already doing, and you'll be surprised how much dopamine, like, it's not like you can feel it. Oh, there comes some dopamine. It's just a sense of well-being that you're like, oh, yes, this is good. Like, focus on the activities that you're already doing. Because a lot of times, I think part of the problem with self care is we're like, how do I have time to do extra things? And so, first, just look at what your schedule has that could be considered. So, just these are temporary ones, like the hot shower. That maybe you make, an overnight oatmeal that you just really love. Like, don't take it in the car. Like, get out a placemat, get up 5 minutes earlier to eat it, right? Just like get out a placemat, put down a napkin, sit down, have your meal. Like, take a few breaths, feel some gratitude, like, have the meal and on purpose, right? Make those meals purposeful. That is also self-care. And if you have time, so there's lots of examples of those things, but if you have time to add in, I think the biggest thing that my clients love to add in is walking outdoors. That has, I think, probably the biggest effect is just getting out for 10 minutes after lunch, so I'm not talking like the, an hour a day, but just a few minutes after a meal, not only, of course, helps with digestion, but it really kind of resets your day and lets you just be away from the office or away from home. It's not doable for everyone, and so you have to find the things that are, but just being in nature, I find, is the biggest the biggest thing that my clients love. If you live in a city, you might have to find a park or something like that, but do what you can. Even just fresh air can be helpful. I'm trying to think if there's any other specific clients that had like interesting ones. I think I will say one more is having real goals that are functional for your weight loss, I think also is a form of self-care. So, for example, I had a couple of clients that were friends and they were working towards, they had gotten chosen. I don't, I've never done it. So I think it's some sort of lottery for the Rim to Rim Grand Canyon hike.
Oh.
And so they both felt like, hey, we're going to be able to do this if we drop a little bit of weight, like, reduces pressure on the knees, all that kind of thing. And so it was this real, like, functional type goal for their weight loss. And because of that, I felt like they were caring for their bodies and focusing on, the walking they were doing, the hiking. And so that felt also like a little bit of self-care beyond just aesthetics, which no shame there, but
Mhm.
just it felt a little bit more like self-care to have that kind of functional goal.
Yeah, I love that. And for your first examples, I really like how it's just doing what you're already doing, but just being intentional and present and making it a little bit more luxurious and enjoyable. Because I do think a lot of people are like, oh, I gotta add more self-care, or I gotta add self-care to my
Mhm.
to-do list. I don't have time for this. But you can do what you're already doing and just in a more loving and enjoyable way. So I think that's a great tip. And then, yeah, walking outside has so many benefits, especially if it is after a meal. Metabolically, that is very beneficial. And yeah, not only are you moving your body, helping digestion, helping insulin resistance, but you're getting that sun exposure outside, the fresh air. And if you are an introvert, maybe you're just, have some peaceful time. But if you're an extrovert, maybe, go with a friend or call somebody, and you're doing so many beneficial things at once. That's a really, bang for your buck activity.
Yeah.
And then I love that goal of, instead of a weight goal specific, having something that, like a functional goal, like you said, that's really focusing on it made me think of like expanding your life experiences and making your life
Mhm.
bigger and again more enjoyable. So that's really great. I think is an excellent example of self-care. So I know we could talk for a really long
Yeah.
time, but I do want to touch on self-identity because I know a lot of people may identify as, living in larger bodies or as being a chronic dieter. What is your advice or experience as people are kind of moving out of that identity, maybe into somebody who is living in a healthier body or a smaller body, or is no longer dieting and they're in maintenance mode and, caring for their body in that way.
Yeah, identity shifts are extremely helpful. It's just like when you decide with the first time you go on a run and you just decide, I'm a runner. What do runners do? Runners eat like this and run on this frequency. And so rather than say, I went for a run, identifying yourself as a runner can really be helpful. And so I see a lot of this on Instagram where, um, well, my algorithm feeds me these things, but it's like, their Instagram handle is some sort of like fat girl no longer, or you know what I mean? Like they're identifying as someone who is overweight, except for they're not anymore, but they still are like, that's still inside of me. And I think that's just really challenging to be constantly fighting against that identity. And it's not that we need to identify ourselves as a skinny girl, but what do you really want to identify is maybe around the roles that you provide, if you have relationships, you can give those things some work and kind of leave behind the weight loss aspect of your identity. I think that your scale weight is the least interesting thing about you.
Mhm.
There's so much more to you than what your scale says. But when we've been chronic dieters, it it does become a challenge to think about other things. One thing is kind of back to the well-being activities is to remember that diet and exercise, like those actually are not hobbies. We sometimes wrap up our whole identity around meal planning and what we're doing for our workout, that it becomes all consuming, and then we no longer do any of our other interests. And so finding other interests, like I love to sew. I don't really know what that's called. A sewist? A seamstress. That's what it's
Oh.
called. A seamstress. I don't think I don't know if I identify as a seamstress, but I do like make I've made several pieces of clothing that I actually like wear on a regular basis. So, but that is interesting because I've never identified myself as a seamstress because I don't do it for work. I don't do it for money. I'm just a hobbyist. And so like right now I'm thinking, oh, that would be an interesting identity to take on. Like, what
Mhm.
does a seamstress do? Where do they get their fabric? What would they do professionally for, how they would finish these seams? And so when you take on those identities, you're able to kind of say like, well, what would that person do? And it's a little bit of a future self activity as well, because it's like, well, if that's who I am, what would that person be doing? And you kind of get information about what you might want to keep doing, start doing, or stop doing based on what that future self that is, that person, that runner, that mom, that spouse, whatever that identity or role that you're looking at, or professionally, you had a lot going for when you're becoming a doctor. And so that, you could, what do they do right now? So it's a lot of like, what can we do right now to be that person? So it's a lot of accessing the future self as well. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the future self work is so powerful. And yeah, another skill that I learned when I did coaching and I think is so beneficial. So highly recommend. If anybody was looking to find you and learn more about your coaching style or maybe work with you, how could they find you?
I have my own podcast as well. It's called Eat Well, Think Well, Live Well. So I talk a lot about mindset during weight loss and just kind of a lot of stuff, both with medication and without. I've started to add in quite a bit of medication information as well. And I'm on Instagram at well_with_Lisa. And I think we'll probably maybe put in the captions some of my free links. I have several free resources. So I have a GLP-1 starter kit. So if you're not working with someone as qualified as Dr. Olwell, if you maybe just get your GLP-1s from your primary care physician, they're not equipped to give you the nutrition and the mindset work that you would get from a coach. And so, don't go into it blind. Don't, and I'm sure you tell people this as well if they're not able to come to your clinic. Don't just think the medication is going to solve everything. You need to have a plan. And so I have just a starter kit that kind of helps you. And if you're even kind of considering medication, you can just check that out to see if it's something that you would be prepared to do. And then if you are feeling like overeating is kind of one of your issues, I also have a what to do when you overeat. So we can put both of those free courses in.
Yeah, absolutely. So they will be included below. And thank you for sharing that with everybody. Those are both wonderful resources to have. So thank you for providing that. And I always recommend, anybody to surround themselves with a healthcare team because you will be so much more successful, especially long term, if you have that team-based approach to get a personalized plan for you. So thank you. And thank you for taking the time to talk about coaching and mindset when it comes to weight management and with or without a GLP-1. So thanks again, Lisa.
Yeah, thanks for having me.